Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And welcome to another hour dedicated to inquiry, reflection, questions, possibilities, and more, all in our effort to understand exactly what enlightenment means and what it is or might be to be enlightened. Indeed, an hour dedicated to learning something more about ourselves, an hour designed to help us integrate all of our knowledge and perhaps even challenge some of the old ideas that we've acquired about the world we live in and the people we have become. This is an hour where we strive to evaluate knowledge as inseparable from the total experience of reality. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. Every week I read a few of your letters as our way of paying respect to the importance you play in helping us to shape and improve our show. Last week our guest was Kimberly Gingras, and she spoke of her journey from abuse and despair to becoming Mrs. Montana and having the life of her dreams. Anna wrote, I so enjoyed your show with Mrs. Montana. She is so down to earth and real. I loved her message and her heart. Thanks to both of you for sharing her story with all of us. Well, you're more than welcome, Anna. Elaine wrote, Provocative Enlightenment was again so enlightening. Today it was especially inspiring, I think, because of the message Kimberly had, which started with a personal story of her own realization and, I think, spiritual intervention that led her on her way to truly do what might have seemed impossible. That's good news for all of us. The impossible is possible. And we had a great time in the chat room, as we always do, thanks to Ravinder and Andrea for their kindness and fun-loving nature. Okay, more about your chat room, Rav. What do you have to say about that one?
Come join us. That's the only way for you to check it out. We have a wonderful group of people there, really smart, really intelligent, on the right track. So if you have any questions, if we can't get them on the air, there'll be someone in the chat room who can answer them.
And today's guest is often a visitor to the chat room.
Yes.
But you also have a couple of other people in your chat room that are coming up as guests. So there really is a great resource in that chat room. All right, Cynthia wrote, Mr. Taylor, I thoroughly enjoy reading your work. I subscribe to your blog, and I'm about halfway through mind programming. As humans, we need to keep pushing the envelope and allow ourselves to evolve to our highest potential, which I am certain is leagues beyond what we experience now. So please keep asking those provocative questions. Could be our collective survival is at stake. Thank you. Well, we'll do our best, Cynthia, and thanks for the feedback. Luann wrote, I love the MP3s you offer for free in your Hay House Radio Hour. A faithful listener, keep up the wonderful work. Thank you and bless. And Mark wrote, thank you for the free InterTalk MP3s, Eldon. I already received the newsletter, have read your books, and have purchased many of your CDs. I believe we need all the help we can get to deprogram our subconscious minds, so I listen to your InterTalk programs every chance I get. I do believe they help, and I intend to get others to listen to as well. Okay, now, thank you both, Mark and Luann, but I'm going to use your letters today to segue into reminding our audience that we offer these free InterTalk downloadable MP3 programs as part of our Pay It Forward program. This is the patented and proven effective technology that has been repeatedly demonstrated to be beneficial in numerous double-blind studies carried out by independent researchers at leading universities and in 3 different countries. There are many subjects or titles to choose between, and you can get yours today by simply going to my website, Eldon Taylor, ELDONTAYLOR.com, and choosing free programs from the left-hand navigation pane. Tangy wrote, a friend of mine told me about you. I listened to you on Beyond the Ordinary, and she was right. You are dynamite. Both you and your wife are a godsend. Well, there's not much to say about that feedback, short of thank you, Tangy. Michael wrote, mind programming by Eldon Taylor has been a life-changing experience. Thanks, Eldon. You have opened my eyes, and with all I learned, I know that I will no longer be manipulated. Well, good for you, Michael, and thanks for the feedback. Now, Rav, just before we went on the air, I received a forward from Hay House radio station from Diane, which was a letter from New Zealand, a woman by the name of Lee. And, this letter kind of touched me. It's what it's really all about. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling that you get that's a large part of why you do what you do. And like our Pay It Forward program. You know, that we do that because it helps others or facilitates them in helping themselves. Let's get that said right. But I'll share this letter, too. Dear Eldon, a short time ago, I signed up for the I Can Do It online seminar with Hay House. I discovered Hay House Radio in December last year, and I'm not that familiar with all the radio hosts and online seminar speakers, and had not heard of you until then. My apologies. No apologies necessary. I live in New Zealand, so things take a little while to make it to here, as we're at the bottom of the world. Anyway, due to the time zone differences, I have been downloading the lectures and listening to them later. Today I listened to yours for the first time. Eldon, your lecture was fabulous for me. It was what I call meaty. There was much to think on and digest, and I found myself crying at my desk as you spoke about your beloved dog and the story about the little mare who died in your lap. You have touched my heart, mind, and soul today and helped me to see things I took for granted in a new light. A fan is born. I'm off to the Hay House archives to download some of your shows so I can learn more. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you. Thank you for your honesty, courage, clarity, generosity, and openness. Today you changed the life of someone on the other side of the world. Today you changed the life of someone on the other side of the world. In gratitude, Lee. Well, Lee, you know, you just gave me, as I said, that new warm fuzzy. You have my gratitude. And do check out the archives, all of you. And, you know, that's all the time that we have for letters today. But I do want to thank you all for sending them in. And obviously we can't get them all on the air, but they do impact our program. I highly value your input. So once again, thank you, all of you. Now to today's show. Originally, it was going to be all about glimpses of eternity, and Dr. Raymond Moody was scheduled as our guest. Dr. Moody has been on our show before, and during his last visit, we discussed the shared near-death experience. Unfortunately, he phoned about an hour ago and will be unable to make the show today. There is an old saying that essentially goes like this. A person is indeed fortunate if they have people in their lives that are capable of inspiring them to go beyond the narrow, limited perspective that so many take to their graves. I am blessed with this fortune, and one of the people in my life that I share the quest for a deeper understanding with is my friend Dr. John L. Turner, or just Jack in the familiar. Dr. Turner is a highly regarded neurosurgeon, lives in Hawaii, and is the author of the truly great book, Medicine, Miracles, and Manifestations. Together, Dr. Turner and I have pushed the envelope, working to separate the valid from the questionable in our search for meaning, and our attempt at going beyond the traditional paradigm. That is the theme, therefore, for today's show, going beyond the traditional paradigm. Dr. Turner has been with us before, so he's no stranger to provocative enlightenment. Indeed, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, he's often in our chat room. All right, we want your input, questions, and experiences. Welcome back to Provocative Enlightenment, my good friend, Dr. John L. Turner.
Hi, Eldon, and everyone. It's so great to be back with you again, Eldon. Thank you so much.
It's indeed our pleasure. Now, you know, I'm going to apologize in advance for something I might do, okay?
Go ahead.
To all of you out there, I know Dr. Turner quite well. And the last time he was on our show, my professionalism slipped, and I called him Jack. If I do that again today, it's not the result of a lack of respect. It's due to the fondness I hold for this man. So now, with that out of the way, let's begin with a $64,000 question. What happens when we die, Dr. Turner?
Well, thank you, Eldon. And, of course, Dr. Taylor, I'd like to call you, but we're friends, so I can call you Eldon, and my name is Jack, your name is Eldon, so that's all straight, Eldon. Okay. What happens when we die has been, you know, the inspirational source for me to do all of this research, to meet people like you, to read great books. But I found something very interesting, Eldon, that the deeper I go into this, the less likely I am to talk about it unless I'm asked. It's a strange phenomenon, and I think it happens when you finally feel that you understand completely how things work. It's our job and duty to share this with others, but not to stand on a soapbox, but maybe quietly in the background, and when asked, try to explain. So that's what it is now. What I'm saying on this, when we die, I don't think we die, Eldon. I think you and I have discussed the terminology, and it's akin to changing trains or something. We simply go into another level. And if you don't mind, if I expound upon this a little, just cut me off if I get too verbose. But here's the thing. I talk with a lot of patients now about this. They've been in car accidents where they've almost died, or sometimes they think they have died. And we talk about the nature of reality. And a lot of times in my examination room, we discuss the fact that the reflex hammer is really nothing but a manifestation of energy. And on the subatomic level, what do we see? We see a nucleus spinning at a high rate with electrons spinning everything in motion. But for the time we need it, Eldon, it's a reflex hammer. All right? Mm-hmm. So I got to a point where I discussed also the fact that this could merely be a dream. Life as we know it is merely a dream. And when we do, quote unquote, die, we simply wake up in the continuation somehow and maybe look back and say, well, what was that? And then it quickly fades and we're on to what we're supposed to be doing again, which is a path to purify our spirit, our soul, and it takes repeated times, repeated lessons. And I think that when we do pass and take that last breath on earth, we end up going to a planning stage where we're going to decide what we need to work on for the next go-round. And then we're going to do that again. Now, it may be here or it may be somewhere else because there's certainly billions of places where we can have experiences. But we've got to work on polishing that soul. So to answer your question now, succinctly, I would say that on this earth, our job here is to learn forgiveness and unconditional love. I think when we can learn that, then we're kind of ready to move on. But it takes the lessons that come repeatedly, one after another. And I believe in this particular universe, Eldon, there are no mistakes. Everything happens for a reason. So I don't think we die. I think we change dimensions in some way that many have written about, have speculated about, but we won't know until we take that final trip, which all of us will be taking. And, this investigation is all very interesting, and we've discussed all of these things, Eldon, from ghosts to entities to, the earthbound spirits who are trapped and haven't moved into the light. All these things are interesting. However, none of that is really important about the dream, the physics of it, and all that. The important thing, Eldon, is what have we learned? That's the way I can condense it. That's all it is. We have to think about what we're learning and how well we're learning it.
Yeah, I condense that for what it's worth. We think of ourselves as a noun. We go through life as, my name is, and I live at, and I went to school, and I own, and everything is all noun-oriented when indeed we're really verbs. I mean, the fact of the matter is the quintessential you, the quintessential me is not Eldon, and it's not Jack. I don't know what it is. I mean, it is that, but when we cross over, we are something else. And what we take with us is our experience. And our experience, as you just said, that's the reservoir of who we are and where we're going. It is our path. It is our purpose. It is our total. In my view, at any rate, you and I have talked about that many times. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to you about some of these things, everything from orbs to reincarnation. But I want to get your book up here for a minute. In your book, Medicine, Miracles, and Manifestations, subtitled A Doctor's Journey Through the Worlds of Divine Intervention, Near-Death Experiences, and Universal Energy, which is, by the way, for the listening audience, an outstanding book. I strongly recommend that you get the book and read it. You describe how you move from the hard sciences to what I think of as the meta-sciences that we both research today. Indeed, you share a couple of compelling stories, and to that end, I'm going to ask you to distill one of them. Share one such, what you would think is the story that was the most compelling by way of pushing you toward an expanded understanding or this new paradigm.
I, as a surgeon, neurological surgeon, I have a lot of colleagues, both in neurosurgery and general surgery and the specialties, and I think I've asked most of them this question. Have you ever had a case of bleeding where it suddenly cut loose and you just couldn't stop it? And I tell you, Eldon, the answer is 100% this. They say, of course, who hasn't? Then I follow that up with a question, well, what did you do? And the answer is always, what can you do? I think surgeons know that. You know, we have little sayings in surgery. One is heal with steel. The other is a chance to cut is a chance to cure. Usually surgery goes very well, but sometimes there's unexpected happens. So I think of all those stories in the book, which are, you know, events that took place, and so I can remember them easily like it was yesterday, I think the opening chapter, to me, was very significant, and I'd like to briefly review that one.
Do, please.
I was doing what I thought was a routine brain tumor type of surgery for a benign tumor called a meningioma. That means it's formed from the covering of the brain. It grows and presses in on the brain, more common in women than men and elderly people usually. And the cure is a removal because it's benign. And this particular tumor was growing on the bone behind the lady's orbit or eye socket. But to approach that, we have to approach it from above by removing a flap of bone and then with a microscope working down on the tumor and removing it. Mm-hmm. That day, you know, in Hawaii, when I came here because there had never been a neurosurgeon on this island. It's called the Big Island of Hawaii, and I knew I could be of service this way. But they also had never had a CAT scanner. And it was 2 years after I got here before they could get their approval through to get the CAT scanner. Mm-hmm. But this particular tumor came after the CAT scanner. We had all the angiograms, the blood vessel studies. We knew the exact location of this tumor. And as I worked on this using something that's kind of archaic called cutting loops, there is a wand with a wire loop at the end which heats up and you can slice through tissue. It can work. It's not as good as an ultrasonic aspirator, but I could do what I had to with a rusty knife, so to speak, which I want to mention later when we get to the John of God business. But anyway, Eldon, point is, after 4 hours, I had one piece left. And I could clearly see this little piece of tissue just like waiting to be removed. And I mentioned to my assistant, look, this little piece and we're out of here. And as soon as I cut through that, Eldon, it turned the brightest red that you can imagine in the snap of a finger. Well, I put the suction in, I put a probe in to put pressure on to stop the bleeding, and I cleaned it up, and as soon as I released the pressure in a split second, full of blood. Well, slowly I identified what happened. That little piece of tumor, Eldon, had worked its way into the artery called the carotid artery. That's the pulse you feel in your neck. And I tell you, if that artery is severed in the neck, the force from the heart will shoot the blood several feet into the air. It's high pressure. Yeah. So you can imagine that situation, right?
Right.
And then I could see the rent left where this tumor had eroded into the artery. Well, I asked for the small sutures. I asked for the very tiny metal clips to try to clip these edges. And 4 hours later, Eldon, I was no further into it than I had started. Every time I released the pressure, it would bleed again and fill up the field. That's the point where I tell you, I've asked surgeons, have they had a case like that? And everyone seems to have had one. Yeah. And when they say, what can you do? I know what that means. They pack it off, get the patient out of the operating room alive, right? Well, what I did, Eldon, mentally, I said a prayer. I said a prayer. Now, I'm not a religious person. I consider myself, like you, very spiritual. I had been an acolyte in the church as a youth, but never, read the material, never studied. But this time I said, if there is a higher power, I said, I need your help because I cannot do it. And we had replaced all this lady's blood. Now, that's an ominous sign, too. That can cause bleeding problems itself. Yeah. I said, so I need this bleeding to stop, and I want it to stop now, and I need your help. So that was what happened, Eldon, and then I did the same thing I had done for 4 hours. I tried another suture. I tried a few silver clips, tiny clips. And then when I released the pressure, Eldon, it was bone dry. I mean, bone dry. Now, I asked the anesthesiologist to bring up her pressure and bring it up above normal. Let's test this out. And it held fast, Eldon. Beautiful. I couldn't believe it. But I still had something on the hook, Eldon, and I said, listen, I'm not through with you yet. I said, tell you what, now, thank you. She'll make it out of here and she won't die on the table. She came to me for help, and I hope I've helped her, but she could end up on a respirator. She could end up stroked out, paralyzed, limping around. I said, I have a deal for you. I said, if you let her come out of this the best possible way. I'll be the best possible person I can be. Well, you know what happened after that, Eldon? 3 months later, she comes to my office, and she has a slight droop of her eyelid that we call ptosis. I asked her if she had any other problem, and she said yes, her husband is not giving her enough sex. She was 70-something. So, yeah, I had to laugh at that. I said, I can't help you with that, but tell me, do you have any neurological problems? She said, not at all. And then she reached in the shopping bag, Eldon, this Filipino lady, and she pulled out this plaque, and it had 2 engraved kanji, and she said, this is for you. And she pointed right at me. And I said, what does it mean? She said, I don't know. She said, but I have this feeling. This is for you. Well, I put it on the wall, Eldon, so I could see it when I talk to patients. And remember, this lady, you know, her scan showed no more tumors. She didn't need to see me. And then at Christmas, I found out what it meant. A doctor came to my office, and he said, that, roughly translated, means peace. Well, I thought I was wired, Eldon, and that's the first half of the first chapter. And as you know, things changed after that. I had an unexpected death, inexplicable, right after that, and I couldn't believe it. So that led me to search to find out what happened, why are we here, and where do we go when we leave here. So that's the story that, to me, is the most important story. The power in prayer, there's no question about it. Unbelievable.
And I know 2 things about that story. The first one is, you know, I've heard it before. I've read it. I still get goosebumps when you tell the story again. And the second one is, I know the man, the surgeon, and he kept his end of the bargain. You know,
well,
you have done a great job at.
But I know this, Eldon. We've got to forgive our enemies and love our friends. It's that simple.
Yeah, and remember the flower pot. We have a hard break coming up.
Yeah.
So let me ask you before we go to the break. Give your website details to our listeners so that they could all go and look at some of these stories and comments. Do that real quick for me, would you?
JohnLTurner.com. One word, JohnLTurner.com. And they can find out a little bit about the book and the chapter summaries and all that. And I think it's something that might interest people who want to know why we're here and where we go when we leave.
Yeah. And there's a lot more information on the website than what Dr. Turner just indicated. There's some sample sound files and other things. We'll get to that in this next half hour. You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Provocative Enlightenment. My guest today is Dr. John L. Turner, and we're discussing going beyond the traditional paradigm. You won't want to miss what's coming up in the next half of the show, so be sure to stay tuned. And we'll be right back after these words from some of our friends.
Every day, every moment, we face choices. Yet, how many of those choices are truly our own? Are you ready to step onto the path of discovery? Read Eldon Taylor's New York Times bestseller, Choices and Illusions, now revised, updated, and expanded. Eldon combines provocative information, scientific research, and his own life's journey into a powerful message that we have the power to change. All we must do is be willing to choose to take the chance and change. Get your copy today from all bookstores.
Have you talked to yourself lately? What does that inner voice say? Are you constantly hearing negative feedback? Ready for a change? Inner Talk, Eldon Taylor's patented subliminal technology, can do just that. Change your inner self-talk. Turn off the negative by replacing it with positive affirmations. Inner Talk has been researched at universities such as Stanford and by governments around the world and has been proven effective at priming your self-talk. Armed with a new positive outlook, you'll find everything becomes easier, from losing weight to stop smoking, giving presentations to riding horses. Learn new things to being a powerful salesperson. Choose your title for change today. Visit www.innertalk.com. That's INNERTALK.com. Innertalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're discussing with Dr. John L. Turner his book, Medicine, Miracles, and Manifestation. in light of today's subject, going beyond the traditional paradigm. But before we get back to today's show, I want to invite you to like our Facebook fan page for Provocative Enlightenment Radio. As a fan of the show, you will receive special announcements, as well as our schedule and incentives from time to time as our way of thanking you for your support. I would also like to invite you to join me on Facebook while you're there, and of course you can follow me on Twitter. All right, back to the show. Before the break, we were discussing, well, actually, I think Dr. Turner concluded on a note of forgiveness and unconditional love. And although, you know, for probably the past 30 years, I've seen that packaged under a variety of labels, it's still the bottom line, what it's all about. Whatever your process or path of inquiry, I think that's what you're going to discover. That's the secret. That's what's in that treasure chest. Would you agree with that, Dr. Turner?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's no question about it. And you know, we all seem to be in a process of waking up to the fact that more than being brothers and sisters, we're all linked in the same chain, Eldon. And we've got to realize that we're interconnected in a way that can't be disputed. And I think if anyone starts to address people as a brother and sister, they're going to see some amazing things happen. And then as they do that and they come to realize that this is absolutely the truth, all of this racism, all the hate, and all these things will stop, because how can you hurt yourself? You know, we're all the same thing. I see that process where everyone's trying to wake up, and I'm doing my best to do it. But as I said, I found out that the closer I approach that point, the less inclined I am to talk about it, unless, you know, directly asked. You know, before I'd want to start these conversations, but now things change in an interesting way. I don't know if you've noticed that yourself, Eldon. I'm sure you have. Have you not?
I have. I absolutely have. But, you know, when you say that, I guess I think of the synchronicity of events, and you and I have talked about this some too. When you get to a certain point, things happen, and you just know that, okay, this one's for a reason, and it's going to unfold in a certain way. You don't question it the way you used to. Indeed, you know, you look back. I look back just a couple of seconds ago because I was looking at the chat room log, and you were in the chat room during the break, discussing, you know, giving some points of view to our listening audience, and thank you, by the way, for that. But I saw a note come across, and it made me think of something. And then you came on, and you said, we just wake up a little bit at a time. We're all just waking up. And I thought of, you know, well, when I created this business some nearly 30 years ago now, we settled on a name, Progressive Awareness Research. We would do the research about waking up, becoming, and it is still that, you know, but I didn't realize what that name, or the impact, I should say, that name would have on my life and the changes that it would bring to me as we went down that path. Because I was changing careers from, at that point, being a criminalist with a private investigation agency, investigating, you know, criminality, if you will, to running today Provocative Enlightenment. And you know, those changes are, when I look back on them, you can see that there is a path, that it was a very straightforward path. But when you're stumbling along in them, until you get to that point where you just recognize that the synchronicity will bring it to you, they often can seem to be, they're just really struggles, and they're very confusing. Did you find that true as well?
I was in the process of getting divorced from a lawyer, Eldon, as you know well. And it's not an easy thing for someone to
Divorces
go through.
are horrible, but a lawyer is a nightmare.
Well, here's the thing, you know, looking back on the whole thing, as it, you know, it lasted a few years. It was really kind of a nasty thing that was happening. But right before it happened, I had reached the point where I kind of understood how this all works, you know. And, you know, I've talked a lot about the scientific evidence for this free will business, and how we may not have a free will as we think we have, and how we may be lagging behind our conscious awareness by a third of a second. But at any rate, the day it hit me, what's going on is that we come here, but before we come, we're involved in the planning stages. You know, we kind of incarnate as a soul family. And the people we encounter along the way, like you, Eldon, and, you know, of course, other friends like our good friend Ernie, all these people play an important role. later, after the experience was all over, I made it through the fire of that. And they say we're forged from tin, iron, and wood into pure gold. Well, I don't know how golden I was, but I tell you what, when you get through the fire and you look back, then you can see what it was about. And what that was about, Eldon, it opened the door for me to take care of my mother for the last 6 years of her life. Had I not gone through that kind of a divorce with all those things that happened, I wouldn't have been able to stop working just to take care of her. That was truly a great blessing. Only in retrospect, now that I see it was opening the door for that. Well, as we go on in life, we go on in these lessons. I'll be 69 this year, Eldon. I'm no spring chicken. But now...
Well, you sound like you are. You look like you are, so I'll just take it for that.
Listen, I'm seeing these puzzle pieces come together quicker and faster and just when they should come. And it's like that saying, be careful of what you think or what you wish for because you're going to get it. That's exactly true. So we've got to not have any negative thoughts. We've got to make sure. I remember my sister years ago told me when I wasn't listening, she said, Jack, if you ever get a negative thought or an idea to do something that's not a right thing, put it in a trash can, put it in a rocket, send it out into the furthest reaches of space where it'll never be seen again. Well, as you weed our mental garden, so to speak, and we stop those negative thoughts, we can see the synchronicity. So now I mentioned a quick synchronous thing to you. Eldon, still there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Thought everybody left me here. Okay, but
No.
Okay.
When you get people thinking, that's what they do, Jack.
Yeah, okay. Well, I hope you weren't looking down and to the right, but that's another subject. But listen, I like to talk about the synchronicity of things when you look back on it. Many, many years ago, when two of my sons were very young, maybe 4 and 6, something like that, I took them to another island, Oahu, to the Sea Life Park, because I really wanted to see the dolphins, right?
Right.
And they had this big show. A lot of people were there, large tank dolphins in there, and then they limited it to one last dolphin. At the end of the show, the announcer said, look, I've got a prize that I'm going to give to whoever can catch this yellow ball. And he took a yellow volleyball and he threw it in the pool, and this dolphin got that ball and he played with it, and he said, now he's going to throw it to somebody. And you'll get the prize if you can catch it. So, Eldon, I said, this is my perfect chance. I've always wondered about dolphins' telepathy. I said, I had this mental image of the dolphin finally getting up in the air and throwing that ball directly to me. I pictured that yellow ball in the air coming right at me. Mm-hmm. And I focused intently on that, and suddenly, Eldon, I opened my eyes, and there it was coming right at me, this yellow volleyball. Unbelievable. And I stood up, my son stood up, we tried to all grab the ball, and we dropped it. And the guy said, well, you'll get the prize anyway, and he threw a fish at us, right? But anyway, Eldon, I said, gee, that's amazing. I said, this is, to be honest, it's not coincidence, something else is going on. Well, just this past weekend, I had been wanting to know more about this project called the Resonance Project with the Nassim Haramein, right? And you may have known him. And he has assistants working on the project, and one is a Dr. Michael Hyson. And on the website for the Resonance Project, you can read about him. I met him with his business partner, an interesting lady named Star Newland. And she was perhaps the first, years ago, to give birth in the ocean with the dolphins in attendance to her baby son. Unfortunately, it was a breech birth, and one leg came out, so they had to go to shore to complete this delivery. But she's been studying this with Dr. Hyson for over 20-some years. And I mentioned they'd be excellent guests for your show because they've studied the telepathy, the language of the dolphins, and also it's very interesting to hear about the CIA type of things that go on with the dolphins and the dolphin language. Some of that testing happened right here, right off the Big Island. So that's going to be interesting. But it shows you how years later, when I'm wanting to know more finally and I have time to understand this dolphin and telepathy, here are the right people to meet. So they have, if I may mention their website, it's called planetpuna.com. And you can read about the Sirius project and what they've done with the dolphins over the years. So interesting.
Yeah, for our listening audience, we have scheduled Dr. Hyson for the show, set a date for it in August. And as far as like the CIA stuff, I mean, some of my earlier work, Pat Flanagan and I sat down in Seattle one day and had a very long conversation about the use of the neurophone with the dolphins and some of the work that our intelligence community was doing to train these animals. But that's a subject we'll get into in August when we have Dr. Hyson and you join us again. But let's do this. Now, I agree with you about the synchronicity. Let's pick up on some real specifics about, what's going on in the field with respect to this paradigm shift. Not long ago, I had Dr. Kevin Nelson on the show, and you and I have discussed this and not necessarily agreed, so I know you're familiar with it. He believes that some, I'm going to get that in some, NDEs are REM intrusions. That is, the brain is visually stimulated, as with dream sleep. I know you know what this is all about. Now, for clarity, Nelson did not insist that all NDEs were REM intrusions, just some. In fact, he was very clear on the show that he believed there was a higher power, that there was a life after death. He was not saying, nor was he attempting to say, that there was no validity to any NDE. So now I know where you are, and I know that you've spent a good deal of time with Dr. Moody, who would have been on our show today, but for another situation. And I know that you're familiar with his literature. And in one of his books, he talks about a subject that met Elvis in heaven. Now, and I don't mean any offense by this to anybody, but is it possible that the NDEs that seem to be psychologically motivated, downright fantasy formations, and they're just REM intrusions?
Yeah. Let me try to address that a little bit. I mentioned in your chat room that the one thing about the REM intrusions, I've never read about them being peaceful or comforting things. They're kind of frightening experiences, right? And the NDEs, for the most part, are not like that at all. And, people feel this sense of peace and comfort. But, Dr. Nelson... But
wait, that's good. Now, I know you're a Mensa member. Let's slow down a little bit. That's begging the question. The early definitions of, we have NDE classified as separate from REM intrusion only because one is peaceful and the other is not. So, to argue that, well, by definition, that's
how
not...
about this, Eldon? How about if I answer it this way then?
All right.
I think that at some point, Dr. Nelson will agree that the brain does not produce consciousness. I don't think he's there yet with that, but I think a lot of scientists now are starting to realize this. And look what happened recently with this space station. Instruments sent up to explore dark matter and dark energy to say maybe this is the parallel universe type of thing. We need to know more about it. And maybe that's where we'll find people like Martin and those who have passed. But the thing is this, and I think you would agree that the brain, let's use that analogy of the television set, right? Mm-hmm. That the brain kind of tunes into the consciousness, and for us, we manifest all these things, right? Mm-hmm. But to say that when the brain is dying, it produces these phenomena is like saying the television set is creating its own TV show. That's a big stretch. So I think first someone has to understand about the consciousness. And if they're willing to realize, it's not like I was taught in medical school and neurosurgery training. I would have, when I came to Hilo, and, as little as a few years ago, I would have said, hey, sure, the brain produces consciousness. Without the brain, there's nothing. But now I understand, Eldon. I've studied enough, I've thought about it enough, and I realize, no, this brain keeps things as we need them, like that reflex hammer. It's kept that way as long as I'm going to need it. The walls of my exam room stay rectangular and nice and pretty. They don't go suddenly wavering and shimmering because it's all energy. But the brain allows us to control that consciousness. But when the brain is going to die, so to speak, but at the end of the time for the brain, how could we say that it produces all these phenomena when it's really like the TV set?
But the point Nelson is making is, look, neurologically speaking, using MRI, we see visually that the same areas of the brain are excited. So anatomically, we're looking at exactly the same event.
Kind of, Eldon, but he's talking about MRIs when there's a lot of problems with that as far as the time lags and all this, and should be doing all these things with something like PET scanners and all these kind of things. But if you'd like, I'd be happy to appear on the show with Dr. Nelson and talk about it. I don't dislike the guy, but for him to say he's the first one to think about it, and he kind of belittles other doctors a little bit in a way, I think, like Dr. Long and the others who have written about near death, and just because they're not a neurologist doesn't mean they're not, capable of discussing it. And
right. I didn't find him that way.
Yeah, I didn't.
Jack, I found him to be very affable kind of an individual, but I do know this: the skeptics really picked up on his material and took it to the other extreme. I guess I'm going to differ with you a little bit here, and out of respect, I will also pass to the power. You are, after all, the neurosurgeon.
Well,
but when I look at the evidence, I do believe that it's quite possible that some reported NDEs are indeed, the result of fantasy formation, and you can call them REM intrusions on the basis of Nelson's observations, but I'll leave that there. So you're saying
that a TV set might suddenly surprise us by generating.
Well, I don't buy that analogy. I agree with you that the mind, that consciousness itself is not limited to organ brain. That I have no question about. You and I could discuss some of the patients that, for all intent and purposes, are brain dead. That come back, or patients that experience the loss of consciousness, deep states of comatose that later tell us about everything that went on. We could talk about Oliver Sacks and some of his work, but I don't have a problem with that. I think the evidence really strongly shows us that consciousness does not originate in the brain, but that doesn't say that consciousness is the network broadcasting either. So I don't accept the television analogy as a fair analogy. I guess that's what I'm saying. But now, not to drag any of this stuff out, because we have very little differences there. You mentioned reincarnation at the top of the show, and whenever we get started into near-death experiences or beyond the grave, two other areas that really come up besides the NDEs are reincarnation and mediums. Let's talk a little bit about reincarnation. What's your take on that?
Well, years ago I picked up that book, 25 Cases of Reincarnation by Stevenson, and his work.
Yep.
And, when you read those things and you see there's something to be said in a way for that. When you read about the little boy, the fighter pilot story and all that all your listeners know about, well, there's something to be said about that. And I would think perhaps a great majority of this world population is going to believe in reincarnation in some shape or form. And I don't think there's any question about that. The question is, if we've erred, if we've really been lead terrible lives, do we come back as a cockroach? Well, I don't know about that kind of stuff, right? But I think the reincarnation, as far as I can say, is pretty clear that we continue this until we polish our spirit. I would call it a reincarnation in a way, because we really don't die, and we do incarnate again. As I said, I think it's within soul families or groups that come together. And, Eldon, when I reached that point of 100% forgiveness, I was able to do that with this knowledge of this whole soul family thing, to realize that, look, if I'm going to learn forgiveness, doggone it, somebody's got to put me through a bad situation, right? And I think that somebody is someone who agreed at a point that would incarnate here with me and put me through the hellish times, right? Just so I can learn.
Sun, yep.
So after that, how can you have any animosity? You've got to love the people that did that. When you can reach that point. It's that simple. And then when that is released, I found, I could move on to much more important matters at hand. with the time left, I've got a lot to do yet to continue to polish that spirit. But I want to get it as much as I can, so the next go round, perhaps I can concentrate on other things, on other things to learn.
I do agree with you.
That's what I think about reincarnation. I think, in a way, yes, we're coming back. We're going through it. We've been here before. And sometimes, it's really weird, Eldon, how it can work. Like my young son, when he was 3 or 4, we were watching TV and eating dinner, and suddenly I'm looking over, and he's just staring at me with this quizzical look and smile on his face. And I took the opportunity to say right then, I said, Doshi, that's his name. It means one who intends to follow the right path. I said, Doshi, what are you thinking? He said that I am you and you are me. Well, a year went by. I didn't bring it up again, Eldon, but I was talking with a doctor I met on the Internet. I told him about that, and he was a little bit of a psychic kind of doctor, a friend of mine, and he said, look, I see now that this boy came to be your protector. I said, you think so? He said, absolutely. So then, out of the blue, I asked my son again, out of the blue, we weren't talking about anything like this. I said, Doshi, if you're going to protect me, what's the reason? He said, because I am you and you are me. Now, that's pretty interesting for a little 5 or 4-year-old boy to say, right? And so perhaps he had been here and polished up things, and now his job is to maybe help me through these things to help me learn, right? So it may not be a linear time thing. It's all of interest. But I think what we've got to do, all of us, we have to just take everything as a learning experience, extract the meaning, and move on to the next one, because it's right around the corner.
I totally agree with you, sir. And of course, I think forgiveness is where it all begins and ends, and I'll remind our listening audience that the Forgiving and Letting Go program that for all intent and purposes changed my career is available at my website, free. It's a download, an MP3. Just go there and get it. When you tell the story about your boy, I'm reminded of my son. One of my dearest friends in this lifetime passed over, and when he was alive, I'd done some hypnosis. And one of the things that we did in forensic hypnosis is, we would show that I could give you a suggestion so that if you lied to me when you were out of the hypnosis, you'd respond with a physiological response. So I would tie that to a finger movement. So the index finger would jerk whenever you lied to me, or I counted to 3. That would be a post-hypnotic suggestion. My friend and I showed this to my friend. He passed away. My son was born, and I happened to be talking to him one day, and I said, now, I think you're telling me a little story. You're not lying to me, are you? And that finger jerked. And I have noticed that finger jerk on many times since then, and I just, it does beg a question. Dr. Turner, we're out of town. Out of time, I should say. We're out of town, too. Share your website and give us some final words of wisdom in the next 30 seconds, would you?
I would say this. I'm entering something in your chat room now. There was a question that, what did my son mean by his answer? And I think it means that he realizes that we're all one, and maybe not just me. I think he understands that we're all one, and he can treat everyone as a brother and sister. The link, you wanted to know the link to the website again, Eldon?
Yeah, please.
It's simple, johnlturner.com, and I hope people enjoy what they see there. They should go to the View Blog section.
And do go there. We're just out of time. I appreciate you being here today with us, Dr. Turner. I appreciate all of you joining us, and I hope you'll join us again, same time, same place, next week. Until then, I want you to remember this. Believing in yourself always matters.